Hi, my name is Tom Hollingsworth. I'm an organizer for the Tech Field Day event series, and we are here with Mobility Field Day live at Aruba. We are here to discuss some of the new technological advances that Aruba has been putting into their software and hardware today, and the folks around the table represent the best and brightest in wireless. Their opinions and discussion topics have shaped the way that we've gone about things today. And I'd like to take a few moments to talk about one of the most exciting things that got them talking, which was Aruba ClearPass and the new extension system that goes into Aruba ClearPass. Now, if you're an Aruba ClearPass user, you know that that is a very powerful tool, but with the new software release that Aruba came out with today, it's even more powerful with the use of extensions. Now, one of the delegates actually wanted to know, what are some of the good use cases for something like Aruba ClearPass extensions? And thankfully, we have a wireless expert who happens to work in a hospital that has some ideas about that. And I'd like to turn the conversation over to George Stefanick real quick to give us some ideas about how you plan on using ClearPass extensions.
You know, it's a great topic, and when you start to think about, you know, first off, you eventually have a library, right, where you can go through and use those extensions. But I think part of the conversations that I was having offline was, you know, how do we more identify devices that come onto the network? You know, when you look at ClearPass, it's really that central piece that is for authentication and, you know, driving your authentication piece, your analytics, collecting that data as to what devices are coming in. But there's still that false sense of identifying, right? Because you don't have something on that device to tell it, you know, what it actually is. You're going off DHCP fingerprinting, you're maybe looking at HTTP redirects, etc. So there were some offline conversations on how perhaps ClearPass could put hooks into other systems, and it was really eye-opening to me. I think extensions, you know, potentially can lead to streamlining different ways to feed identity.
Now, one of the things that you mentioned there was the ability for the system to put hooks into other systems. And when we say that, what we really mean is that the system now has an API that can be called and that can make calls and that can do things like automation and orchestration. Now, that's a battle that I have been fighting in the networking world for quite some time now. You know, does an API make something more well-defined, as it were? And I know that Jake Snyder has some very interesting thoughts on APIs. Jake, why don't you talk a little bit about why APIs are important to this whole extensibility idea?
You mean in addition to SDN? Is that?
I didn't say SDN.
No, I'm teasing. You know, just having systems that are separate but able to communicate back and forth with each other is kind of, it's more than the sum of the parts. I can have ClearPass, and I can have the controllers, and I can have, you know, my business applications, and they all do stuff for me, and that's great, but having the ability to have them work together for things like Epic, right? So I'm going to integrate Epic into my workflow with ClearPass. Now ClearPass can forward identity into Epic, and maybe that's a single sign-on, maybe that's a security layer, maybe there's other things we want to leverage, but being able to take that data out of ClearPass or out of Epic and make a better decision about what I'm doing on the network because they talk to each other, that's huge.
So one of the things that you just mentioned there was the idea that now that systems can talk to each other, they can share data. For years, what have we said? Man, I wish I could get this data out of this system. But now we can go, hey, I can get this data out of this system, which gives us new ideas. And Richard McIntosh actually had a really awesome idea about using the Envoy system, I believe it was, for something at your location. What were you talking about with security there?
Yeah, so with ClearPass, one of the extensions, the folks from Envoy talked to us today, and I was thinking of completely eliminating the check-in process. So you go in, you sign the iPad, you agree to be a visitor, you're accepted by your host, and then the big thing that's an issue for us right now is security badges. So if you're a visitor on site, you get a security badge, and that gets you in and out the exterior doors in case you need to leave the building for any reason. But that's a very manual process for me right now. If a visitor comes on site, they sign in with the welcome coordinator, and then I have to go in and assign a badge to a user, make sure it cuts off at the end of the day, and recycle those badges every day. So if I can use something like ClearPass or the Envoy system, and go ahead and assign those users their badge, their Wi-Fi credentials, everything they're going to need while they're on site, and have that terminate at the end of the day. That simplifies everything. That makes the visitor's experience an actual experience, and it's just a time saver at the least.
Very interesting.
When I think of APIs, I think of candy jars, right? I mean, you just pull out what you want.
That's good, and now you make me crave sugar. Josh, what are your thoughts here?
Yeah. It's interesting Richard mentioned the Envoy solution, because that stood out to me as well in a little bit different way. I have a lot of customers who are K-12 education customers, and one of the pain points that they're having to increasingly deal with is security at the entrance to the building, to schools. Mm-hmm. And that has to be a man, someone has to staff that. Someone is always going to be there dealing with visitors coming in and out. But those people, maybe receptionists, secretaries, those sorts of things, are also not necessarily well equipped to handle the other piece, which may be onboarding guests for Wi-Fi and that sort of thing. So when you have the ability to tie all that in together, and talking to the guys from Envoy, there could be some potential down the road too for integrating instant background check, security verifications, and things like that into their solution. So you start tying multiple pieces of that and chaining that together, then you have a greater use case for those customers to go make a budgetary decision to say, let's do it.
Yeah, and that's for lower education where you're dealing with a bunch of disparate schools. What about a higher education system like Roel deals with? Is having that ability to integrate all those pieces together something that would be valuable to you?
I would see a combination of all of those in my environment. If I could automate a lot of that or tie in systems with APIs in a way where it's a lot more efficient, especially with calendaring to people external from your organization, and then tying that to a badge, and then tying that even to checking in and giving them the guest Wi-Fi right off the bat, right before they even step in the door, that would save a lot of time.
Yeah. Scott, what do you think about this?
I don't know what I think about this.
What?
Well, I haven't decided how I would use this system. I mean, I see there's a lot of cool potential there, and that's the main thing I see is like the extensions open a lot of doors, and to some degree we haven't come up with all of the ways that we can use that yet. I mean, there's some obvious things that are being talked about, like the Envoy system and receptionist systems and things like that, but I mean, there's got to be more interesting ways that we can use this, and I think probably the most interesting ways that the extension system is going to be used are yet to be seen.
I think that's a good point. And one of the things that Aruba did a great job of today was not just saying, hi, we're Aruba and we make all these things that do the things you want. It was, hi, we're Aruba, and by opening this platform to everyone, here are a whole bunch of companies that have really awesome ideas that now work with our systems because we've given them a way to integrate, a way to get data moved back and forth. And just like you said, and I have the exact same problem you do. I sit down in front of a programming IDE and my mind just goes blank. But there are people out there that are like Ryan is a perfect good example. He's like, I have 57 ideas of the way that I want to implement this. And I'm getting cracking on them right now. And I'm pretty sure you probably got 4 ideas of what you want to do with ClearPass as we speak. So what do you think about this, Ryan?
I actually need some time to digest it. There's so much to it. You're talking about changing the fundamental way authentication and policies are applied. You can go beyond radius now. You don't have to. I wrote a post for the Aruba community about this. Security is broken. It's awful. And it's a fundamental failure of the protocols. And we need new ways to do it. And ClearPass is the only one giving us those options right now.
And with the ability to extend ClearPass to do many, many other things, by getting it right the first time, they have a platform that other people can build in and go, if you would do it like they would, we would use your stuff.
Well, it can act as a translation point. The user doesn't care about radius. The controller in ClearPass, they speak radius. They speak .1x. They communicate that way. But we don't have to present that classic username and password to the user. We can present all sorts of different ways for them to verify their identity and then verify it against policies on the back end that give context whether it's location or time or who you are, and apply all of that transparent to the user without the classic, I need to enter a username and password.
Is that something you guys would find useful, that ability to kind of hide the complexity of the device from people that don't need to see it?
Like your HVAC contractor who's installing he's plugging in his controller or his controller, plugging in his HVAC control system for centralized management out at some branch or something. He's plugging that into the Ethernet. He doesn't know anything beyond, I have to plug this into the Ethernet, and maybe you gave him an IP address to use. And then it would be nice if your equipment could just go, oh, I know what this is. This, for whatever reason, classifies as HVAC. We're going to do the right thing with it and block it off and tunnel it to the right place. And all these, it starts hitting the Internet of Things type stuff.
Well, I mean, it's
can't deal with really well right now.
It's what Envoy is doing. They've taken the guest registration and the identification process and made it simple for the end user by hiding it behind all those layers of complexity on the back end.
So what you're saying is that sometimes people bring things into your environment and they don't quite understand what they're bringing in. And wouldn't it be awesome if the wireless network could rapidly adapt to those necessary changes but keep things secure at the same time?
Or even the wired network as well.
Our systems need to be more intelligent, and that's what this is introducing.
George, is this ringing any bells for you right now?
Well, in healthcare, I mean, healthcare systems are masters of APIs.
Yeah.
I mean, we have literally dozens, if not hundreds, of disparate systems that we have to make talk. So to your point, I mean, there's so much that you could probably do that we're not even thinking about today. From pulling in from, facility information, biomed information, because all this is coming in, like we said before, on the wireless. So, and again, identifying it properly in the front end, building policies behind it.
Sean, what were your thoughts here?
So one of the other things, that I think is important about all this, right, is having that exchanger, right? I mean, you see healthcare, we see message exchangers, being an integral piece of how a hospital works, right? Is being able to create sort of the single source of truth for specific things, right? Wherever they lie natively, right? So Active Directories where my users are, some device database, or maybe it's a biomed, backend, wherever it is, if I can pull that data where it lives and the people that are responsible day to day just manage that data like they have, but I can take that data and do something else with it. I'm not trying to, configure it once over here and then have the same, configure it separately over here. It really simplifies things. And I think that's core to kind of all of these use cases.
One thing I find really interesting is they talked a little bit about this at Atmosphere, about how extensions give them the ability to make integrations happen very quickly. And so instead of waiting 6 months to a year for, hey, I'm a business, I want to integrate into ClearPass, I got to wait, I got to get in and talk to these guys, I got to get it on the roadmap. It's a year down the road before my product. Most products can't wait a year to get that integration. They've got some customer like George who's like, I need this now. And, being able to say yes, a month to get that extension in place, wow, that's a big difference between, you can have that done during a customer proof of concept. You can have that, have Epic or have your big apps that you're using integrate quickly instead of waiting, hey, it's going to take a year for us to get this in the code.
So let me ask you this question, because the ability to break those pieces out of the larger, monolithic code base is actually something that a lot of software as a service companies are doing. I mean, how many people, both in here and at home, have 4 or 5 different apps from Facebook on their device? Facebook, Messenger, Photos. I mean, those are pretty simple to bundle together, except when we have to rev Messenger or we have to rev the actual Facebook app. It's much easier to build, ship, and run in a much smaller package. And I think that's kind of what you're speaking to.
Yeah, decoupling the integration from the platform is huge. It lets us make, lets the Envoy guys make changes quickly without having to, let's get on the ClearPass guys' calendar and figure out, they're on I think it's like a 6-month release cycle for ClearPass. You don't want to wait all the way for 6 months to get that fixed. You want to fix it tomorrow. Everyone wants to be able to go to their phone and hit the update now button and have it done.
Yeah. So one of the other things we kind of hinted at here, and George I know is going to have some thoughts on this, is about IoT, Internet of Things. Look at the amount of devices that we have that are being brought into our network on a daily basis that we have to account for, and not things that you would even think about. Like obviously, insulin pumps and blood pressure monitors and that kind of stuff in a healthcare environment are expected. But what about Philips Hue light bulbs, or Nest thermostats, or heaven forbid, an IoT device I haven't even seen yet? How can ClearPass help us deal with those? Because I know that they've worked on that in this newest release with some policy management stuff. And we talked a little bit about it, but I want to dive into that. How do you see that helping the explosion of IoT, keeping things secure? Jake.
So one of the things I liked about their message was they're separating AAA from the policy, right? Which is primarily what ClearPass is all policy. But being able to go in and have .1x-like security policies in place that I don't have to go touch thousands of devices, and how do I deal with devices that don't support .1x at all? How do I manage that and have a policy wrapped around it? And being able to take that and abstract it out into other databases and types simplifies rolling out and having to just putting a layer of security in. Is it the best? Is it as good as putting .1x on everything? Probably not. But is it better than just leaving it wide open? Yes, very much so.
Richard.
And I think that you guys just perfectly defined the ClearPass on Connect piece, where we can now profile everything on the device or everything on the network. Where, like they said earlier, that they can SSH into these devices, do CDP information, LDP, and go device, and then we can actually build this view of what's on our network and apply policies to those devices, like the HVAC controllers that we're seeing pop up. We can apply an immediate policy because we can identify it as soon as it plugs into the network. Hey, this is an HVAC controller. Let's go ahead and make sure it's on a segregated VLAN, it's quarantined from everything else, and it only has access to what it needs.
Yeah. Now, Scott.
Extending on that, just wanted to call out specifically that it does wired now without having to do .1x. So it can do the fingerprinting, and they've enhanced that. I guess they're using Nmap now. So instead of just saying it's a Linux device, it may actually be able to tell you what device it is with a little bit more granularity, so that you can come up. So because half of these IoT devices are all just some sort of Linux box, and it's like, great, it's Linux. What is this? Is this somebody's laptop? Is this an HVAC controller? Is this a Raspberry Pi that someone's trying to hack into the network with? I mean, we have no idea. So you can start to get a little bit more information about what these things are with a little bit more profile information, and then we can actually make those decisions and shut the port off if we need to, or shunt it off to the correct VLAN and all that.
And that's in a situation where your enterprise network is what you would consider to be a relatively trusted, safe network. What happens when you work in an environment like Roel does, and half of his user population is actively hostile to his network? How does device fingerprinting help you so that when a kid brings in maybe like an Xbox, it prevents other bad things from happening?
Well, I guess the downside is we let them bring an Xbox.
I don't think you're going to be able to tell an 18-year-old kid he can't take his Xbox to college.
Well, the way I see it is I like to think a lot larger scale. And so I see this as a way to, with all the different vendors out there, we're seeing a platform in which they all can come together, a very familiar platform that we all could use. And that way you can apply the same kind of policies to every single device or anything that touches your network. And then from there, be able to troubleshoot a lot easily, because if you're seeing this one issue on this one device, it's probably this similar on others. And so for me, it's more of the same platform that I can have my AV vendor come in and tie into, and also the HVAC vendor to come into. At least we're all on the same page with the technology and access to the network.
Yeah. And I'm going to share a story that Josh Williams and I remember. We were working with a customer one time, and we walked into their brand new data center and saw a box that we'd never seen before. And turns out that they had called the HVAC vendor and had that thing installed. And when we started looking around, we're like, you left what open? Oh, well, we needed to get in and manage it remotely. And so it would have been a whole lot nicer to have a ClearPass system that said, hey, we just saw a new HVAC controller on the network. Do you want us to apply the HVAC policy and shut down this remote access port? As opposed to finding it 3 months later going, what is this?
Or at the very least, a policy that says, I don't know what this is, let's go ahead and put quite a few restrictions on until we figure it out.
Or even with the extensions, I noticed that there's extensions to Palo Alto. So if they're connecting to a switch where maybe there's a couple of other similar devices, it can fingerprint that device and say, all right, this device is similar to this on the same kind of network. I'm going to put it into this VSys. And it's got already a set policy there, set amount of firewall rules that are applied to it, even tied to VPN policy. So only the HVAC guys can VPN into the network and only access these number of devices on these ports. Like, I see this going very far into different vendors.
And great point, right? Unknown device talking to the outside network flag, right? Bring that to the top.
Right.
Because that prevents that black box getting installed.
Yeah.
And what I think is great about this is a dashboard that we don't have today.
Yeah.
That dashboard is so helpful.
Well, not even just an unknown device talking to a network it's not supposed to. What if it's a known device? I'm not going to name names here, but what if a very large retailer suddenly got some kind of malware on their POS endpoints, and now the POS endpoint starts talking to a server it's never talked to before? Not much, not visible in a trace, but all of a sudden it's siphoning data somewhere it shouldn't. Do you think the ability to not only see it, but to stop it and to be asked about it would have saved a large national retailer from a very expensive and embarrassing problem? And that's credit card data. What happens if there's Social Security number? What, George, do you think of the HIPAA nightmare of what happens if somebody's medical records get exfiltrated?
As I understand it, if 500 patient records are breached, you have to report it. So if it's $4.99, you don't have to, right? for some silly reason. But yeah, in healthcare, patient records are highly confidential.
Yeah.
And like you said, if those systems are not following a characteristic of a behavior, alerting on that would be very helpful.
Yeah, exactly. Anyone else have any thoughts about ClearPass, about the extension, security, OnConnect? Anything else that we saw today that just really you thought was the bee's knees?
The piece with Insight.
Okay.
So we get the analytics in Insight, and through that we can kind of see all the auth errors we have. We can run reports on these. We can have scheduled reports on hey, we saw all these auth errors overnight. There were all these problems, so we can go ahead and remediate that before the users come in the morning. There's a lot of visibility into the devices that are on the network now, and just having that data readily accessible through Insight, I think will help us out immensely.
Watch list.
Watch list.
Yeah, I mean that right there. If I could put in my VIPs, my C-level suite, and get ahead of any issues that they might have, that would be so helpful for me.
Yeah, George, are you saying that the executives sometimes have issues that would be nice to know about them?
Well, I will say the wireless network is fine, but sometimes they bring in devices that just don't work well. Right. So if we can get in front of those. And those are the folks that typically get the newest and greatest, right?
Oh, yeah.
So if we can get in front of an issue, perhaps a driver problem or misconfiguration before it goes out, because usually I'm 4 levels down by the time it gets to me. So if I can skip that and go right to the top as far as seeing what the problem is, that'd be very helpful.
Josh, you had some thoughts here?
For me, for ClearPass, what resonates for me is integrations and APIs. My mind is swimming with all the possibilities, and I'm not a developer like Ryan. He can go home and actually do something about it. I just have the ideas. But I see some really cool possibilities. For example, especially in healthcare, George does that environment every day. I do it every other day, so I'll defer to him on a lot of this. But healthcare is an environment where we have people visiting your wireless network, joining your wireless network, and need to do that securely on a regular basis. It's a little bit different than retail, where they're in and out of your store in a few minutes, or a school where your guests are only intermittently there. There are real valuable things that we could do in healthcare with secure wireless and those integrations. For example, if we know we register you at the front desk, even as some possibilities, the patient could authorize certain visitors. And you get patient, once you register as an authorized visitor, you could get directions to the room. You could get all kinds of information. If you're waiting outside surgery and post-op, you could get updates and notifications via your mobile device and things like that. There are HIPAA barriers we have to clear there, but I think that they're clearable hurdles, and I think there's some real exciting possibilities there.
And I think you're right. And honestly, what it comes back to for me, after all the discussions that I've had about this product, Aruba has built a solution that is extensible and it's programmable, and it gives us the capability to stop thinking about the limitations of infrastructure hardware and start thinking about the possibilities of platform software. All that data has been locked behind walls that we couldn't access for years. Now we can. And now the wheels are turning. What can I do with this? How can I make this better? How can I integrate this with everything so that everyone appreciates the power that we now have? And the people who are around this table have some great ideas. The people who are watching through that camera right there and listening to the sound of my voice right now also have really great ideas. And thanks to Aruba, they now have the ability to go out and make one of those ideas a reality, to have the opportunity to make someone else's life much easier, and let's be fair, maybe make a little money at it. So we have to say thank you to Aruba for giving that capability to a new generation of IT professionals who, unlike me, can code. All right, I think we're going to go ahead and wrap up this roundtable. I want to thank all the guests here for their insight and discussion. If you'd like to see more roundtables like this, you can always head over to our website at techfieldday.com, where you can peruse hours and hours of video. You can also check out our YouTube page, youtube.com/techfieldday, where we are growing by leaps and bounds. We are well over 8,000 subscribers. We have well over 1,000 videos. We'll have 1,000 and probably 4 or 5 by the end of the day after we have all the sessions from today uploaded. We have more great things coming up, so please stay tuned. If you head to our website, you can get a list of all the events we have through the rest of the year. If you don't see an event that you want to hear about, if you see a company on the website that you want to hear more about, or if you don't, please do not hesitate to reach out to us. We are here to do whatever it takes to make you, the viewing audience, happy. So for myself, for the folks around the table, for our friends at Aruba, a Hewlett-Packard Enterprise company, I am Tom Hollingsworth, signing off. Thank you, and have a great day.